everybody. Welcome to our conversation on comedy writing with Steve Byrne and Erin Darling. And the rest of the people you're seeing up here is the team from ISA. I'm the manager of production and research, and I'm hosting this webinar.
I'm so glad I'm on this comedy event. I'm the director of operations. I work on events and sponsorships and stuff, lots of fun stuff. And I just want to say thanks to everybody, to Steve and Erin. This is awesome. Thank you so much for spending your Friday afternoon with us. And thanks to all the attendees for coming out for this event. This is going to be a lot of fun. I hope we'll be laughing. I mean, I assume we'll be laughing, but I don't really know. And just a quick reminder, we have our pitch challenge open right now, which I'm sure Chris is probably going to talk a little bit about too, but you've got today. That's it. So get your pitches in so that you can be part of, in the mix of potentially pitching to the pitch panel next Thursday.
Hi, I'm Jaron. I'm the creative executive at the ISA. I mostly find content scripts across all our platforms, contests, writing gigs, development evaluations. I work very closely with Felicity, the director of development, and my best friend. And yeah, just as Molly said, all of you are my best friends, Molly.
You totally just broke my heart, dude.
Mine too, Jaron.
Thank you, Erin and Steve, so much for doing this. It's a great Friday treat to have a comedy event like this and get your guys' expertise on this. Like Molly said, Chris is going to talk about the pitch event. We actually, I think, are extending it till Sunday. We're all watching your pitches, and so send them in. We are very excited to be doing that.
Hi guys, I'm Carissa, the manager of social media and marketing. Thank you, Erin and Steve, for doing this event with us, and happy Friday, everybody. I'm excited for the weekend. I don't know about you all. But yes, as everybody's saying, we have our virtual pitch challenge going on right now. It is until midnight tonight, but since we've been getting such a good response, looks like we are going to extend it until Sunday. All you have to do is go onto our website, check our socials. I'll put the link into the chat. It's at Network ISA on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can film a 90-second pitch, upload it to YouTube or Vimeo, and then you can have the chance to pitch in front of execs from MGM, Selfish Mermaid Productions, and to a development and literary manager at Citizen School Productions. So I highly recommend it. I'm very excited about it. Check social, and if you don't follow us on social, at Network ISA, I'll put all that information in the chat, and we can't wait to see those pitches.
I'm Felicity Wren. I'm the Director of Development. I love screenwriters. Screenwriters are my jam. I love writers. I love stories. I'm very excited to be here to learn some more stuff about comedy writing and what we need to do. I think we all need a laugh right now. So happy Friday, everybody. Stay safe, stay well.
I was going to ask earlier everybody to tell their favorite stand-up comics, or since we're talking about comedy. But so I'll start. Bill Burr. I love Bill Burr. He's one of the best storyteller writers out there, I think. And so I do the video editing and posting and all that. And the question that everybody's going to ask over and over is, when can we rewatch this video? And I'm going to try to get it up over this weekend. We try to have a pretty quick turnaround on these. And the best way for you guys to make sure you can see it when it's up is really to keep an eye on our Pro Tips and Tricks page on the ISA website, but also to subscribe and ring that bell over on YouTube.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, everybody. My name is Max. I am the Director of Education with the International Screenwriters Association, and I work with all these beautiful people to help writers as much as we can with these events. I'm going to have an event this coming Wednesday, the 20th. It's a walkthrough of the craft course, which is our online course that we developed for everybody. And we've had it for what, Craig, like 4 years now? I think it's been up there for a while. Yeah. It's been updated recently. It may be 3 years, but I'm going to do a walkthrough of that. It's free for our members, and that you can find information on that in the classes portion of the website. But I also work with Felicity and Jaron and Molly and Shayna and Craig in our development company, and we try to find some projects to take out around town. So, you know, I'm just as busy as everybody here. But in terms of my favorite comic, thank you for the reminder, Scott, but Brian Regan is probably far and away my favorite. I had to mention Brian. He's almost too easy of a choice. But anyway, thank you to Erin and Steve for being here. Excited to see if I can make myself any funnier than I already am. So it's a tough job.
Hey, everybody. Craig James. I'm the founder of the ISA. The reason we kind of have everybody pop on is just to represent that there is a real community of people working for you, serving the writers, emerging screenwriters out there. And we want you to see who we are so you feel a little bit more of a connection. It's hard to when we're not running live events, physical events where we're actually going to our third Thursdays locations around the world. So it's important we feel, to stay connected to the community as much as possible. And that's why we're here. We are going to pop off in a second, as was mentioned earlier. But I do want to mention something I was thinking about today, because I've been struggling personally with being super creative. And, you know, we've talked about this before about focusing on mental health. You know, as difficult as it is that I'm finding myself to go ahead and sit and write, these events help inspire some ideas, and I'm just taking it one day at a time. Everything I'm going to learn today with Steve and Erin, I'll just write it down, and that to me is a step forward towards my career, and I think has value. So even if I'm not spending all the supposed free time that I have nowadays focused on creating, because I feel like overwhelmed by the world that's going on around us, I'm still just being as active as I possibly can by coming to these events. We're all here, jotting down little nuggets of great information and letting my mind just kind of let that process. And I feel like my dreams have been crazier than they ever have been, and some really great stuff is coming out of that. And so taking notes from some of that is really helping. But the point is that I think it's a good time for everybody to just keep focusing on your mental health, stay healthy, relaxed, and don't put too much pressure on yourself that you have to create in this moment. Absorb what you can, let the rest process. I think it was like Bach or Beethoven who wrote an entire symphony in his head before he actually sat down and wrote the thing out. And I feel like this is a great opportunity to let all of what your ideas are to process in your mind. And then at the moment when you're feeling at peace, to sit down and just start writing. But don't put the pressure on yourself too much to do it just because we supposedly have all this extra time.
I'm so excited. I've never met Steve before. Hi, Steve.
Hey, how are you?
Good. And happy that you're here. And I've known Erin for a while. We actually met at a clothing swap like ages ago. So random. And, you know, she was the funniest one there. So I was like, yay, you're cool. Let's be friends. Steve is a stand-up comic you said you were from Pittsburgh.
Yep.
And he had a show on TBS for a few seasons called Sullivan and Son.
Yes.
Correct? And you starred. Did you direct that also, or did you?
No, I just wrote and starred in it, produced, yeah.
Cool. And Erin is also a stand-up comic, writer, script consultant. She also has this awesome podcast, you guys, called Hot Pizza Ass. So make sure you go check that out. It's really good, and I'm very excited to have both of you guys here with us. So thank you very much. We're going to start out with a couple of just easy icebreaker questions, and then we're going to dive into some questions about comedy writing and get your guys' take on that stuff. And then we'll take some questions from our attendees. So first of all, Steve, what are you watching right now?
I watch The Curse of Oak Island, which is not scripted, but that's like the one show I chomp at the bit. I'll be honest with you, I don't watch too much episodic television. I spent a lot more time, especially the last few years, just kind of reading and watching older films, and any chance I can get to watch the commentary on films or running director's commentary on films that I've seen. I've been doing that for the last year or two. So that's kind of where I spend more of my free time. Sorry, awesome. I wish there was a better answer of like, you know, the narrative of this story is so I'm just not that person right now.
Right, but you're also directing too, so that commentary is like you're just gaining knowledge, right?
Yeah, I as Erin mentioned earlier before we jumped on, I wrote and directed a feature film about my early years in stand-up called The Opening Act. That was supposed to come out in July. It was going to premiere at the Just for Laughs festival, but because of everything that's happened, it got pushed back to I believe we're going to come out in October. And I haven't, you know, it's all going to be announced soon, but I'm just, you know, just saying. But yeah, I mean, that's why I got hooked on all that stuff.
Right. Yeah. So Erin, what are you watching?
90 Day Fiance is my guilty pleasure, but once I realized that I could very quickly go down that rabbit hole and just waste all my time doing that, I started reading, which has been cool because normally my normal day, when I start reading, I fall asleep. But now, because I have free time, I can read when I have life energy. So I've been reading stuff that's been really, really fun. And I've been reading Rewrites by Neil Simon, which is awesome, and Mindset by Carol Dweck, I think her name is. So that's been really, really cool. So I've just been trying to read more and stay away from reality show nonsense, but it is really fun. And I do kind of like it.
Yeah, I agree. When I have to get my mind just to go nowhere, I'll just turn on like a reality show. And I used to work in reality TV, so I sometimes I think too much about what's going on, but then I'm like, okay, just mind erase. When you guys were kids, what was like a movie or a show or something you saw that made you say, oh my gosh, I want to do that?
I mean, for me, sorry, my dog is growling. For me, I really connected with Wizard of Oz when I was a kid. I really loved the books and I also loved the film, and I wanted to be Dorothy. And I just have always identified with that story in a weird way. I don't know, it's such a fantastical world that it's like weird that was the thing that like really captivated my imagination. But I think when I saw Judy Garland and Wizard of Oz, I was like, oh my gosh, like that's like a fantasy world I want to be a part of, you know? And I think that was the first time in my life where I kind of like started thinking about like living in a fantasy world, which is really what you're doing when you're writing. So I would credit that with being my first little spark. What about you, Steve?
It's funny you mentioned Wizard of Oz. I think the reason it's so resonant even to this day is that it's just great storytelling. And before I jumped into this, I remember sitting down with a friend and he was dissecting Wizard of Oz, and it's just the ultimate wish fulfillment. I mean, the hardest thing to do, I think, sometimes when you're writing a feature or anything is tethering in this individual's desire or want, and whether it's Disney films or usually it's in a Disney film with a princess or Wizard of Oz, you get to do it in song. So I think it's creative, and again, it's the greatest. I think it's one of those greatest kind of films because at the end, Dorothy does get what she wants, but in a way that's unexpected. So I think it's great storytelling. I'm glad you brought that up. But I think for me, like when I was young, the film, and I had the poster there. It just by coincidence is Superman, and it wasn't until I grew older that I really appreciated. And again, watching the Donner, commentary on it of just verisimilitude was the word he kept using over and over again, and the truth and honesty of not making it campy, but like, no, if you're going to make somebody fly, let's really make them fly. And if you're going to make this character exist in this world, let's really make this character exist in this world. So I really appreciated, it's kind of like peeling back the curtain and being welcomed into a world and understanding how they did it, how it succeeded. And that was the first time I think where I was kind of like, it wasn't just at face value of me in a theater eating popcorn, watching a movie, where it was the first film where I wanted to learn more about it. And that was kind of the tipping point for me as far as just being a stand-up to maybe storytelling.
Awesome. My favorite is Superman too. Like I'm a huge Superman fan. Christopher Reeve was like, oh.
Perfect, yeah.
For me, it was when I watched movies when I was little, like Labyrinth. And Never Ending Story and like so Dark Crystal. Those to me were like, what is happening? And I need to be in that world. Just take me there. Okay, so last question, and then we'll get into the comedy stuff. What's a really good piece of advice or best piece of advice that you guys have read or been given directly?
Sometimes I do shows. I feature for Jeff Garlin, who's amazing. I love him so much. And one of the best pieces of advice that he ever gave me as a stand-up was to talk more about things that I care about, which to me, I was like, well, I'm not writing stuff that I don't care about, but what he meant was like, he could tell when I was on stage saying stuff that I had lost interest in, or material I'd written a while back, or things that had not necessarily like connected to my life as of late. And I thought that was so good because I wasn't thinking in that way, because you don't watch yourself as a stand-up unless you watch your tape, so you're not like having that out-of-body experience. So when someone that you respect that is giving you that advice, I was like, oh my gosh, he's so right. Like this, I don't know if I feel this way about this anymore, and it just kind of got my mind working in a different way. So I think that applies to stand-up and writing in general. Just make sure that your approach to stuff is something that you care about.
Yeah,
What
I
about
think
you, Steve?
to echo Erin, I think, one of the big themes in the opening act, the film I wrote about was, this young comic that's so eager to be a stand-up comic, but when he actually goes on the road for the very first time, that's what the film's about, a comic's first time ever being in like an improv, a professional club. He finally warms up to this road-weary veteran, and the veteran, Cedric the Entertainer, is relaying to him that, being a comic isn't selling tickets, it's not getting on the Tonight Show, it's not having an hour special. Being a real comic is about discovering your voice. And I think no matter what art form you're in, whether you're an artist, a writer, or a screenwriter, or an actor, you want to discover your voice. And to echo what Erin was saying, I think to really discover your voice, you got to pull back the layers of the onion and to find out what is important to you. And I think if what you're communicating is resonant, then your audience will come find you. You don't have to go search for your audience. And, like an example, I heard a few people on the chat mention Bill Burr's their favorite comedian, and Bill's very popular right now. And Bill is somebody, when I was starting off in New York, if I was a freshman, he was a sophomore in the echelon of stand-up comedy. Bill and I used to go to Yankee games all the time. And Bill is somebody that always had his voice. He was never looking for his voice. And a perfect example is we went to these Yankee games all the time. And I remember this one time a pop fly goes up and this grown man leans over a kid and catches it. And the kid's kind of bummed out. And the grown man's turning around thinking everybody's going to clap. And everybody kind of courtesy claps. But then our section was booing him. Like, boo, boo, fuck you. Give the kid the ball. Give the kid the ball. So, I mean, this is going on for 2 minutes. The guy stands up, holds the ball up, and presents it to the little boy, and everybody starts clapping. And then Bill in the back goes, "You fucking softy, you should have kept the ball. Smoke this, everybody else is smoking it, you loser." And he's just heckling this guy for a good minute. And I've never seen a section of people at a sporting event laugh. And Bill was like treating it like it was a comedy club, and he was just tearing this guy. And that's a perfect example of somebody that's so comfortable in their skin that at a sporting event, the most non-conducive environment for a comedy routine, Bill is just being himself. He's voicing his voice. And that's a prime example of just living in your skin and being comfortable and going for it.
Awesome. Well, I think that's such a good segue into our first actual official question.
I did that on purpose for you.
I know. Thank you. I feel great now. I feel like I'm a pro. How did you guys find your voices in comedy in general, writing on the page versus standing up on stage? Like, where do you guys think your voice came from, or how did you find it? Or was it a trial and error? Like, talk about your own voice as a writer.
I mean, mine's definitely been trial and error for sure. I've gotten to points where I'm very frustrated with stand-up. I've gotten to points where I've thrown out all my material. I've gotten to points where I've said, I don't want to get on stage again unless I'm really talking about things that are really like where I'm at right now. So I feel like through my years, and when I started stand-up, I was in my super early 20s. So you change a lot, and your POV changes a lot, and the things that matter to you change a lot. So at every point along the way, I'm just like, oh gosh, like, do I really, really like this? I've gone through all of those evolutions and shedding skin. I feel like I'm still in the process of finding my voice, to be honest with you. But I think that like a really good way for me to kind of see where I'm at is see if the audience is like connecting with you, because sometimes people can tell if you're getting up on stage and you're kind of just like in a rhythm that you've just been in because this is the set that you've decided that you're going to be doing and that you're going to be working on. But if it's kind of like a living, breathing thing, if you approach it like that and you're looking in the eyes of the people in the audience, like, or do they feel you? Do they get you? That's like a pretty good barometer, I think, as far as stand-up goes, to see if you're kind of on the right track of that. If people, are they tracking where you're at? That's kind of been my experience, but I'm definitely still learning.
Steve?
I would say, like, for me, finding my voice was, I remember I was at the Comedy Cellar, and I was maybe like a year or two into stand-up comedy. And I remember Mark Maron telling me it takes 10 years to find your voice or to become an overnight success, or, you know, really what it was about your voice. And I was like, this guy's an idiot. I'm going to do this in 2 years. It took me 13 years is what I realized. It took me a lot longer to discover myself on stage and feel comfortable about the things I want to talk about. But ultimately, like, I think when it comes to writing itself, the exposure of being in a writer's room on Sullivan and Son, and then we did it for 3 seasons. So I learned so much from that. But when I went off and started writing my own scripts, the feature side, my voice, I think, was discovered via tone. You know, I think tone is so important, because you'll watch a film and you think, oh my God, that was a really broad piece. And then all of a sudden we're going to more of a indie feel with this next scene and this intimate, you know, so there's always these pendulum swings of tone. And it wasn't until, like, I was working on rewrites for the opening act film that I realized how important tone was and where I felt comfortable writing. And that was because our producer, Vince Vaughn, made me rewrite. And I'm not fucking joking here. I have a cache, like a terabyte of scenes I've rewritten. It must have been like at least like 50 drafts of that damn thing. So, and then all the scenes I've done on top of that. And via that, I discovered tone and where I feel comfortable.
So for you guys, what is the difference between, you know, doing stand-up and writing those kinds of jokes? How does that translate for you guys onto the page? Is it really different, or is it not that different? Are you just changing kind of, you know, how you present it? Or will you just talk about translating your comedy onto the page? Steve, you want to start?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I've found in my experience that whether you're a sitcom or you're doing a film, it's dependent on the situation, and the situation should be that scene takes place in a comedy club. But I found for the most part that stand-up comedy is best suited on stage. And when you're jamming jokes into a sitcom, you can feel it, you sense it. And I think over the course of 3 seasons of Sullivan and Son, I took one joke of mine from stage and put it into a joke. But that was really it. I think that, I don't know, it's like having coffee at, you know, at like the Playboy Club or something. I just feel like they don't necessarily mesh. It's weird to me. And that's why I think, like, when I saw a show like Mulaney, that sitcom, it didn't last long. I saw what he was trying to do, but he was very smart in taking his stand-up, and he would do like warm-up, and he would be doing stand-up, these interstitials. And that was his way of implementing stand-up into the actual sitcom. But I've seen pilots, I've read pilot scripts, and I've seen other bad pilots that haven't made it, because I was watching a lot of pilots prior to Sullivan and Son. And you just see these comedians jamming their jokes into it. And it's just like, but that's not the world you're creating with your wife. You're in a kitchen now, and the kid just ran out, and you're not in a club in front of 200 people. It just never meshed for me.
And why do you think that is, though? And Erin, then I'll go to you, but why do you think that, I mean, obviously, if you're somebody in your kitchen talking to your wife, you're not just like spouting out jokes and she's like laughing. She's like, you're dumb and shut up, you know, do these dishes. But like, what are the, you know, how do you then change your mindset, like, and write something that works for, you know, a feature or a sitcom versus what you write on stage?
Well, I think the great thing about writing for a sitcom is that you have a team of 8 to 12 writers, maybe more, all in that room discerning everything. So the great thing about, you know, watching sitcoms for me now is that when you watch a sitcom and it says written by, it's like, that's whose turn it was to just type everything out. Because when you're in the writer's room, you're pretty much blocking everything out, coming up with everything and saying, okay, you got enough, go write it off. At least that's how we did it on ours. I'm sure that it might be different with other shows, but I know from other experiences and talking to other writers that for the most part, you're blocking it all out. So you have the reliance of 8, 10, 12 great minds in there, all generating really great stuff instead of one comic bolting open the door and saying, no, we're going to jam my jokes in. It's like, it never works. It's never worked.
Erin, what are your thoughts?
I completely agree with everything that Steve just said. I basically don't have to answer this question because I feel like the only times I use stand-up material in things that I'm writing, especially if I'm trying to write like a TV thing, the only time I've ever really done that successfully is if the scene is someone doing stand-up. I feel like I hate that when I'm doing consultant work or punch-up work and I'm looking at someone else's script and it's like a dramatic scene or a sad scene and they try to make like a joke or throw some sort of weird reference in there. To me, that feels like super stand-up-y. It might work on stage, you know, if you're trying to make someone laugh about a serious topic. But when I see it in a script, I'm always like, you got to cut that. Like, we got to change this, like some other, I don't know, there's some other way you want to make this funny, try to, but it's like the dialogue just seems so unbelievable to me when I see it in written form. So I think that that's the cool thing about being a stand-up though, and doing, you know, script work, is that you have the opportunity to do both or to do either. So when you think of an idea, you're like, oh yeah, this is kind of a joke that I do on stage. This is a situation that I would put in a script. And I think that's the biggest difference. Like, situations or visual jokes can be awesome in scripts, but like a stand-up joke, I just kind of feel like is for stand-up.
All right. So if somebody was new to screenwriting or wanted to get in a TV room and was writing a pilot, what do you guys, like, what are the fundamentals for you of, if you're going to write a comedy feature or a comedy in general, are there certain rules that you guys, like, are there certain things that are like, don't do this or do this? And just, I mean, I know that for me, when I'm writing, I really try to stick to things that I find funny that are really happening, or things that could really happen. I mean, kind of an example is in The Breakup, where, you remember that movie, The Breakup?
I love that movie.
Where they're talking about the, you know, doing the dishes or like the lemons. I mean, to me, those are such true moments in a relationship, but they're really funny and it's just kind of heartbreaking. So are there kind of certain elements that you guys always bring with you when you're writing something?
I got to be honest with you. I think it all comes down to foundation. And when years ago, I pulled a bunch of books out. Okay. So years ago, when I was just a stand-up, I had never written anything. My friend Jordan Rubin got this book for me, Save the Cat. So I'm sure everybody read that, right? And it was just a really great book in terms of, like, you know, Blake Snyder made it so easy to understand the foundation and tentpoles of a story. And then all of a sudden I was watching movies, and even to this day, I'll pause at the 5-minute mark to understand what the theme was or call to action, etc. And I'll go through all these. And then years later after that, I got this book, Stephen King on Writing, that was a gift to me. And that was very inspiring.
Yeah.
And then before I started writing the feature film, I picked up these books by Robert McKee, Story and Dialogue. And then my good friend Vince Vaughn, after Sullivan and Son, we had many discussions about Joseph Campbell and The Hero's Journey and The Writer's Journey. So
I love those.
picked these up and got really into them. And before I wrote the feature that's about to come out, I felt like I had some semblance of foundation, of tent poles, of what you need to have a successful screenplay. And then, I got notes on it already because I was just rereading it. But I got these books by William Goldman. This is Adventures in the Screen Trade and Which Lie Did I Tell? And these books, I of all the books I've read, and they're all very inspiring in their own ways, these were the most meaningful to me in terms of what I'm trying to instill throughout the foundation of those, because he's telling you his experiences in the screen trade, but along the way, he's giving you lessons, which it's not written as a lesson plan. It's not written as an educational book, but via his stories, he's explaining to you what makes a successful screenplay. And, you know, I was writing, I just finished my next film. And I remember there was this one scene where I'm writing this thing and I go, no, your hero can't be giving exposition. Your hero is always receiving exposition. And the only reason I knew that is because of this book right here, the William Goldman book. So I think it always comes down to foundation and these little details that I'm learning now that I have the basic foundation of it all. It's the details from William Goldman, and then just taking your own personality and implementing it into whatever structure it is you're trying to tell.
Good answer. And thank you for the visual books.
Yeah, I'm a prop
those are
comic.
great.
Yeah.
I need to write all those down. Yeah, I always try to approach things with personality and point of view, like trying to make sure that everything that you're writing has that. So, and that goes both for stand-up and for screenwriting, right? So if you're a stand-up and what you're doing doesn't incorporate your personality or point of view, can you really say that this is stand-up material, right? And same thing with when you're going through a script, like does every character have their own personality and point of view? Like, is their dialogue consistent? Is this like an actual character? Is an actor going to look at this and be able to have fun playing it because it's like a real person? Or, and I always like try to always go back to like character, you know, if whether it's dialogue or what's happening in a scene, like, is this consistent? Does it make sense? Is it either providing like a joke or a plot point or helping the story move forward? So I always try to like go back to like the people, you know? So if you're a stand-up writing material for you, like go back to you, like to your inner voice, like to who you are. And for the characters, like go back to them, to every one of them individually. Like if you have to do it that way and keep looking at it and do a pass for every person, then do a pass for every person. So I think that like, that's kind of like my temple, I guess, is just always going back to the people and imagining every person as a real person.
People are asking kind of like, it seems like being a stand-up comic is a good way to get into, you know, having a sitcom or getting into comedy writing in general. Do you think that you have to do that? Do you think that like all writers should do an improv class or do stand-up if they want to be comedy writers? Or do you think that's just one more way sort of in for you guys that worked for you? Do you think everybody has to be stand-up comedy funny to write comedy? I guess that's the question.
I don't think so. I've come across many people that are absolutely hilarious, genuinely hilarious, that have never been in stand-up or improv. They're just naturally funny, and they happen to be a conduit of comedy via writing. You know, there's a few writers on SNL I know over the years that have never been in stand-up or improv. They just write. I mean, the majority of them do, but I don't think you necessarily have to. But it doesn't negate the fact that being a stand-up is a great way of getting into writing, because when you're in stand-up, there's many different facets. There's no wrong way to do it, right? So when you actually have to sit down and type things, what helps is the foundation of understanding what it is you're doing, whether it's a sitcom, whether it's a feature. There's foundation, there's 10 poles you have to meet. But expressing yourself via humor, yeah, it could be through anything, my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think that definitely not. I don't think that you have to do stand-up to be a comedy writer, to have a career in comedy. I actually think that you can get opportunities through doing whatever is fun for you and whatever you're most likely inclined to spend your time doing, right? So like, don't fight it. Like, don't be like, oh man, I have to get on stage if you don't really want to get on stage. Like I've had opportunities from podcasts that I've done, you know, like you'll never really know what is going to lead to something else. So I think like trying to be a strategist about it in that sense with something that isn't really like fitting with you doesn't really do you any favors. I think just do the thing that you like doing. If that's writing, double down on that. If it's podcasting, like do that, you know, tell stories in that format, like do the thing that you're going to love to spend time on and let that be one outlet of creative expression. If it's right, if it's related to writing or if it's not, I think it'll help you either way.
And I mean, this is a big giant question, but maybe you guys can go into personally, like kind of knowing how something works or not. But, you know, on stage, when you guys tell a joke, you have an instant reaction. So you get instant feedback, whether it's funny or not. How do you guys know what's funny on the page and not necessarily coming from you as the stand-up comedian, the character? How do you know that something's working on the page for you that's funny?
I would say for me, because when I write something that's, you know, scripted, I'm more thinking about situations and I'm thinking about visual jokes, which is different than kind of how I think about stand-up. A lot of that is gonna all play out in, you know, what happens on film and who's directing it. So it's kind of hard to gauge whether or not something is funny. I think the best way that I've been able to gauge whether or not something is funny that I write in a script is run it by people, you know, run it by your other writer friends or people that are maybe working on a sitcom or have been writing films, and just kind of, you know, see what they think about it. And I think that's kind of like the best way to see if something reads or not. But also I think that in script writing, I don't think that we should put so much pressure on ourselves to be like super funny. And I know that sounds really weird, but I think like so much of the script is about the story. And if you're sacrificing the story to try to get like a laugh, those are the things I always encourage people to cut, actually. So like make it organic, make it real, and don't stress yourself out, I don't think, with like make joke, whatever's on the page.
I think like, you know, if you're asking how do you know something's funny when you're writing it, I just get excited while I'm writing. I'm like, oh my God, this is good. This is gonna be fun. And again, if it's always on story, it just makes it that much better. Also, I got to tell you, from the experience of having written this feature and then having actors, you know, perform it, sometimes there are things that you've written that you have never in your wildest dreams did you ever think, oh, that's going to get a laugh. I mean, there were times where, you know, actors on the opening act perform lines that just, I was like, I didn't think of it that way, but that's fucking hilarious. So it's great. And then I was reading something in the chats over here that somebody had a quote from William Goldman where nobody knows anything. And it's so true, because, you know, when I was reading that, it just triggered all these things I remember when I was reading his books of just like, you know, you're sending your scripts to executives, you're sending to agents, you're sending to your manager, you're going to send it to people that are paid very, very, very well to know how to market a film, and they have all the data. But at the end of the day, nobody knows fucking shit out here. So ultimately what matters is your vision, your belief, your investment in your project, and driving it uphill, because it's going to be an uphill battle. No one wants it. No one understands it, but it's up to you to be your biggest cheerleader, because everybody's going to say no. And there's countless examples in those books of stories, of films, of things that we know, films that are iconic that have been told no 1,000 times. I have a documentary film that's doing very well. I didn't get in any film festivals. You know, I have a film that's going to be coming out very soon, and everybody said no, but somehow it worked because I believed in it and I said yes. So, yeah, I think you have to go through this industry understanding that that person on the other side that drives a really nice car, that's dressed very, very nicely in tailored suit, or, you know, has all the great, you know, makeup and jewelry, they don't know shit, and they're scared shitless, and they're probably going to be gone in another year or two. And all the executives I work with at TBS it's a revolving door. It's high school. Every 4 years, things change. So all you have to do is just believe in yourself, because nobody knows jack all.
Where do you really draw the line between writing something that's like really funny to you and writing something that's going to be funny to the masses?
Well, I think if you're like a stand-up comic, there are two factions of stand-up, okay? Mm-hmm. There are the artists who don't give a fuck. There's guys that are like, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to do whatever I want, and I don't give a shit. They paid to see me, or they don't give a fuck. And then there's other comics that are like, no, I'm here to entertain. I want to be asked back. I want the manager to like me. I got to tip the staff. So it just depends if you want to be a renegade like Doug Stanhope, who lives by his own rules. And it's just like, I don't give a shit. I'm going to wear whatever the fuck I want and say whatever the fuck I want. And again, it goes back to discovering your voice. If that's your voice, then there's going to be people that'll be attracted to that. There's Ari Shaffir's, there's Doug Stanhope's, there's people that just live by their own rules. They don't kiss the ring. They don't play the corporate route. And they're very successful for that. But you gotta understand that that road might be a little harder, a little more treacherous. But they've forged a strong enough path for themselves that they're making a great living, and they have a great following, and they'll always have a great following, because they're going to say the things that A lot of people aren't saying it. That's why they're banned on Twitter or Instagram or whatever. So I think it's just up to your personal preference of what it is you want to do and what it is you want to relay and how comfortable you can feel at night knowing, all right, this is the bed I made in. I got to sleep in it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that there's definitely like two ways that you can go about doing it. I feel like for me, I feel that being on stage and sharing, like, stand up is a shared experience. It's your experience and it's the audience's experience. You want them to laugh. I want my audience to have fun when we're all spending that time together. So if they're not, then I walk off stage and I feel awful. So not everyone's like that though. So, but I would say that I think that it's like a communal experience, and that's what makes it fun and rewarding for me personally, but everyone's answer to that is going to be different. But I do think that if you walk off stage and the audience doesn't know who you are, you lost as a stand-up. And I don't mean that in a famous way or a remember my name type of way. I mean it if they don't know something about you, they don't know your truth, they don't know your point of view, your personality, things I was talking about before. If you walk off stage without them knowing that at all, like, why are you doing stand-up?
I'm just going to tell you a comment, Steve. Jake Thomas wrote, Steve, I did studio tours at the Warner Brothers lot while Sullivan and Son filmed there. And he said, your reputation as the most gracious and inviting star in the lot still stands today.
Aww.
Well, it's just insecure.
Isn't that nice?
No,
you're like, I'll be a dick pretty soon.
I felt bad for those people because they go to Warner Brothers, right? And you pay whatever the fuck you pay, and you get in this golf cart with all these other yucks from Indiana or Ohio, and you're driving around and looking at these big sound stages, and they're tan and they're nondescript, and they're just big and intimidating, and they don't get to go on any of them. They just drive around. It's like, yeah, Ocean's 11 was filmed in there. It's like, well, can we see it? No, we're going to go to this next sound stage. You could see where Ellen performed, but you can't go in that either. So I just felt bad for them. So anytime I saw them, if we had a break, I'd go outside and I'd say, come on in. And then the first year especially, I remember some of the other producers and showrunners are like, you can't have tours, like go on set and take pictures and selfies. And, you know, I was letting them take napkins and props and stuff. Like, you can't do that. I'm like, why not? They're going to tell all their friends that they just were on the set of a TV show and they took all these pictures with the staff. And I thought it was a lot of fun, not only for me, but in terms of getting the word out. And I got to tell you, I never knew when that show was going to get canceled. So our bar turned into an actual bar after the tapes. We filmed in front of an audience. We kick them out. And then for 33 episodes, we hooked up kegs to the taps. We got out the whiskey and we drank and plugged in the jukebox till 4 or 5 in the morning. And every Wednesday, we tape on Tuesdays. Every Wednesday, we get a letter from security saying, you guys can't be smoking pot. You can't be drinking. You know, you can't be doing this. And I would just rip it up and go, who knows when we're going to leave? So let's just fucking party.
Okay, so Erin, I want to ask you this because you talked about punching up scripts. So Meredith Hale is asking, what would you say are the rules of comedy, or what do you look for when you're punching up a script?
Well, these are all kind of things that I mentioned earlier, but I'm always looking for character. I read it, especially for the most important characters, consistency. Sometimes weird things will happen in scripts that I don't know how it got to me, where someone didn't see this, but you know, they'll mention this character is a PhD, and the first line of dialogue you hear out of their mouth is ain't something. And I'm like, why is this PhD using the word ain't? Like, I don't know anyone that uses that word, like seriously. So I'll always look for stuff like that. I'll always look for jokes that seem really out of place. It's weird because as a comedian, like a lot of the times I think people, you know, they want you to punch up material. They want you to write alts, have other joke suggestions for things that they can improve upon or add to their current script. But a lot of the times when I'm looking at it, I see like problems with those certain things that they already have. And I think sometimes making a scene better can mean taking a joke out. And I know that's probably not the common stand-ups approach to it, but I'm always looking for that too, you know, ways to make it better and ways where like a joke is hurting. And so that's kind of what I do when I approach a script. And then I always, because I'm a woman, I always look for the female characters and make sure that they are talking like a woman, that they are reacting like a woman. that, you know, their relationships look real to me, because a lot of scripts come to me that are written by dudes, or that a dude has gone over, and then they'll say in the note or the email where they're asking me to look at it, they'll always say like, oh, do you think that this character is too bitchy or too unlikable? And I'm like, no. It's not, like, make her more bitchy. Like, and I always know that when I get that note, a dude saw it before me and gave that piece of feedback. So I'm always like looking to make sure the female characters are real, they're normal people, that they can be unlikable. You know, I'm always looking at stuff like that. So that's what I do when a script comes to me.
Awesome. And Steve, will you just talk a little bit about, so was Sullivan and Son your first, you know, foray into like a writer's room on a sitcom? And what was that like for you, being, you know, we're all going to live vicariously through you? Like, what was that experience like to start that?
It was amazing, because as a stand-up, you're constantly by yourself. It's a profession of solitude. I'm always eating by myself, going to movies by myself, you know, on the plane by myself. So to be part of a team, it was great. And the one thing I learned about, the greatest thing I learned about being in a writer's room is you never know. You know, you could take a line that somebody suggests and you may not like it, but until it's executed on stage by an actor or an actress, you just don't know. It could work. So give anything a shot, especially when you're doing it via committee. If someone believes in something strong enough, why not believe in it? But for me, look, the reason, you know, you move here, the reason you get a suitcase and you move from Pittsburgh or the Midwest, where somebody was insulted, I called somebody from Indiana yuck. It's like, no, we're all just kind of like just these Peabodys wandering out there dreaming and hoping to God that you can do this. And so when you finally move here and then it actually does kind of happen, and I was driving on the set in the Warner Brothers lot, I was like, this is fucking crazy. This is why I moved here. This is the greatest feeling in the world. And I never took it for granted. And I remember I read this book called Top of the Rock by Warren Littlefield, and he collected all these stories from everybody from must-see TV, Thursday nights, NBC back in the day. And I remember when we were going to the second season, and Noah Wiley was telling the story about ER. And he went to the Warner Brothers lot. He had been working there for 10 years. And he goes to security after all those years of just driving on, having his own parking spot. He's got to wait at security. They buzz him in. And he goes, you know what, I'm just going to go to my meeting and afterwards maybe stop by the stage. So after his meeting, he goes to the ER stage. And at the time it was vacant. There was nothing in there. And he walked in and all these memories flashed back to him, but there's nothing there. And he just took a moment and he said to himself, it's almost like it never happened. And going into that second season, I remember reading that going, I am going to have as much fun as I fucking can this whole run. And that's why we drank all the time, partied, had fun, laughed the whole time, because you never know when the party is going to end, because every show is going to get canceled. Every film, the shoot's going to end. And you work so hard to get to there. Why not have fun while you're there? And that was always the guiding principle on that show, on this feature I did. It's why you pack your suitcase and leave the Midwest and have dreams and aspirations. And the minute you're in the thick of it, you get a multitude of no's. Every resume, everything you see on a resume, that's a yes. That's a celebration. That was a great phone call from your agent, a fucking exciting call from your manager. You got the fucking part. What you don't see on a resume is the thousands of fucking no's. And those no's are crippling. So when you're there to work, have a blast. That's my principle.
All right, so this is a ship has sailed question. How frequently in film or TV do you feel that your great idea got done or used by someone else, like months or weeks before you could launch it, and it was just a matter of bad timing and luck?
Well, I have a so I directed a feature, like a feature doc about the amazing Jonathan, and he's a great comic magician. And at the time I was doing it, I learned, so a little backstory, Jonathan was a great comic Vegas magician headliner, and he was told he had a year to live. And 3 years later, he outlives expectations, goes back to stage, and I thought, what a great impetus for a documentary. And I called him up, I said, look, can I make a doc about you? And he said, of course. So I go to his comeback shows, and on the way there, Jonathan tells me there's another documentary being made about me. So I'm sitting there, money invested, hotels, all, everything. And we're two people making a film about a guy who's coming back to stage. So look, he had a vision, I had a vision. There's been a lot that's happened since then. To answer your question, I think ultimately it comes down to, you've just got to believe in yourself. You got to believe in your version of whatever it is you're doing. But if it goes to market first, maybe you just prove that yours is better. Maybe you put your own personal stamp on it, and your voice is relayed via that joke or that show or that film or whatever. But the bottom line is, there's always going to be something else out there. There's always going to be some hiccup. There's always going to be some bump, and it's how you deal with it. Even on a selfish level, as a stand-up comedian, I remember talking to Chris Rock years ago at the Comedy Cellar, and somebody was talking about how they had a joke, but so-and-so was doing the same kind of joke. And Chris just said, keep writing. Just keep writing. Who gives a fuck? Let them have it. If you keep writing, if you keep generating enough stuff, you won't even need that joke. You won't even think about that joke. So that was a great piece of advice I remember from Chris Rock.
Awesome. Erin?
Yeah, I've totally had that experience. I mean, I had that experience recently where I wrote an animated pilot that I was super excited about. And then the first comic that I respect and that I love, who I've also done an animated show as VO talent with, I had him read it and he was like, this sounds a lot like this show. And I was like, oh, I'd heard of it, but I'd never ever seen it. So I took a look at the show and I was like, yeah, you know what? Like, I do need to make some changes. But luckily, because I'd never seen it, so it hadn't influenced me to that level, I was able to like make the changes and adjust my script and my project enough to the point where it was salvageable to be like something very, very different. But it is kind of weird when you're like, oh yeah, someone had this exists kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a will, there's a way, we all as writers, rewrites, that's what we do, right? Writing is rewriting. So changing your stuff always is a good idea. It's probably going to get better that way anyway. So don't fear changing your ideas if something exists. It's also happened to me before where a very famous YouTuber stole my podcast. I had a podcast that was out maybe like 2 years ago or something, and it was a high concept, like noir kind of true crime thing. And they did a YouTube video of it with the same title, and it came out maybe like, I don't know, a week or 2 weeks after mine came out. And this wasn't like a podcast debut that was hidden, like we were on the top 200 of iTunes comedy charts, like people knew about it, like, and I was just shocked that happened, So sometimes it'll happen to you, sometimes you'll be doing it and you have no idea. But I think, like Steve said, like as long as you're self-generating, changing stuff and kind of, rewriting ideas that you've done, or not worrying about someone else that's doing something similar to you, unless, it becomes like a big deal for them and you have to like get your lawyer involved. I really don't think it's generally not that big of a deal because it happens to everyone. As long as you have coping mechanisms and strategies to kind of alter what you're doing, then it's fine.
This is like a micro to the macro, right? So the micro issue is like, for me, is like, as like a stand-up, I would go back to being a stand-up comic, is that all those comics I started with that stole, that were known as thieves, that didn't have the capacity to generate their own original material, they never went up those rungs of the ladder. There's a place for them. They stay right there. And you might get a bump, you might get a little hit, but that's almost, I always looked at it as like severance pay. It's like, okay, thanks for the effort. Here you go, that you're done. Because people that are generating, people that are coming up with original thoughts, people that are getting personal, they're giving themselves a multitude of opportunities to be successful. But the people that steal, they just have never come through.
Hi, my question is, you guys as a comedy writer that comes from an underrepresented community, whether it be being a female writer or a writer from a Mexican or Asian heritage, do you feel pressure to debunk stereotypes in your writing, or always present characters that are close to you in a very positive light, even if it goes against the comedy?
I never felt, when I had Sullivan and Son, being Korean and Irish, my mother was Asian on the show, obviously I had an Asian sister on the show. I never thought of it as like, oh, we got to do this for the Asian community. I just want to tell a great story. And if you tell a good story, hopefully they'll keep coming back. Even in the feature act, the feature film, the opening act, Jimmy O Yang, it's very autobiographical. So Jimmy O Yang plays a younger version of me on the road. And there isn't anything that happens in the film that somebody says something to him about him being Asian, or somebody doesn't, when he's bombing, it can be so easy to write, you suck, chink. Like, I could have put that in, and then you make it racial. But to me, it was like, the story's paramount. Make the story paramount. And if he happens to be Asian, I think that's a stronger, bolder choice, because I never wanted to set out to be like, we're doing this for the Asian people, we're doing it. I'm just doing this for people that have a dream, that wanted to do something, and it's about a kid's journey, and he happens to be Asian. I think if you box yourself in that corner, I think sometimes, especially these days, people don't want to be spoon-fed or force-fed a political or social agenda. They just want to be entertained. I'm not saying there's not a time and place for that. I think it's important to do that. I think Chris Rock is somebody that comes to mind that's taken societal issues and parlayed them in the art form of stand-up comic, and makes you really think about things. It just depends, again, on your voice. What is it you're going to bring? Michael Moore is going to do a different show than Bill Maher, and Bill Maher is going to do a different show than Ray Romano. So it depends on whatever it is that you want to be the conduit of. But I personally, over the years, have discovered that I don't know that people necessarily want to be, here's a perfect example. When you see a poster for a new show on NBC, and it's a white dad, and you got the black mom, and you got the Mexican kid, it's like, that show is going to be off the air in a month, because people don't want to be force-fed diversity. They want to just enjoy a good collection of talent that happens to be together. And I think when you get on that train, I think it's a very, very tough sell. That's just me personally.
Erin, what are your thoughts on that?
I love this question because it's something I always think about a lot. So I'm Mexican American and a woman, and so I'm always thinking about how I can write stories that incorporate diversity. But me being me, it just kind of comes out in the writing. It's not necessarily like, I'm never going to tell a story I don't feel comfortable telling. I'm never going to write a story just to write it for diversity. I'm going to incorporate all of those elements through the characters and through what they go through and their backstories. And so in everything that I write, I'm always thinking about, women, realistic women. How can I have them in this story? And is one of my characters, like, do I have like a me in that story? I'm always putting me in my stories. There's always a character that I see me in. And as someone that's mixed, that also looks very white, I'm always like, okay, like, how can I like tell my story in a way that's, interesting, that other people can relate to? Because like, these stories like don't get told a lot. Like, there's like one show on TV that talks about being mixed. So I'm always talking about that kind of stuff, and always trying to find ways that I can incorporate my reality into the reality of the worlds that I like to write in.
So, I mean, essentially, I think the overall answer is write things, don't write for the sake of having a diverse character and then writing to those stereotypes. It's write a human being.
Yeah, I think it becomes disingenuous. People see right through it, and it's just like, I don't feel like dealing with this. It's like, is this a real family? Is this a real, I think people just see right through it, and it's just
forced.
It's so forced.
Yeah.
It's so forced. And look, these days, I was watching Old School a few weeks ago. That movie was made 10 years ago. You couldn't do that film today, that version. You couldn't do that version. And then you go back to The Hangover. You couldn't do that today. Why? Because the palette has changed. Buyers have changed. So as much as you even want to sit there and beat your chest about diversity and all, it's already happened. It's already happened. Like, the industry is ahead of you. So what are you going to bring to the table? Because you can't even think of casting a show without the casting director and producers and the network going, well, who's the diversity? Where's they're worried about it. So don't worry about it. Just write a great story. That'll all come out in the wash.
Right. Okay, so I'm gonna ask a couple more questions of you guys, and we're gonna wrap it up. And so we had a really great question about how do you guys keep yourself going? I mean, especially now with us all being at home by ourselves, how do you guys create that sense of community or a writer's room with your work so that you don't feel so isolated?
I'm lucky enough to be quarantined with 2 creatives, which is amazing. Well, so basically my boyfriend, who is a comedy, he's actually an NBA host, but he does podcasts, and he's kind of like an aspiring comic in a weird way, but he's really, really good. He's been in a writer's room before at Comedy Central. He's really good at looking at my jokes and my material. So, and he is super supportive of what I do. So luckily I have him. And then I also have an actor who is here, who is incredible, and he does, you know, indie films and also big studio films. So anything that I'm working on, I'm lucky enough to have people around me that I can be like, hey guys, let's do a table read. So that's been extremely helpful and supportive for me during this time, because I have found it really frustrating, and I do really miss the community, especially in stand-up, because we don't have that. So even if we're doing Zoom shows, it's like we're not really hanging out before or after, which I feel like that's like the life, like the blood of the comedy community is like what happens before and after the show when we're talking to each other, catching up, and remembering that we have friendships, you know? So it's been helpful to kind of create that little environment just based on where I am. But I think other people can create that based in your own worlds, you know, whether it's people that have similar interests as you, if you want to create a Zoom group, getting people together, like just having people in your community is so important right now. And I'm totally an advocate for that right now, for sure.
I think Craig said something earlier that was very resonant, which is don't put the pressure on yourself to feel the need because you have 2 months off to like, I got to come up with some. I've always found with stand-up comedy, I've worked in ebbs and flows. I'll go on a tear for like 2 weeks and the jokes will just come to me. And then if I sit there and I force it, it just doesn't work. I've learned over the years to, you know, just step away for a few minutes then. Stand-up's always going to be there. The stage is going to be there. You're going to get up tonight. You know, you'll figure things out, but don't put the pressure on yourself to feel you got to do something new tonight just to do it. Trust yourself. It'll come. It'll happen. I think especially during this quarantine, I like writing by myself. I'm in my garage now. You know, this is where I wrote the feature act by myself. I just wrote in here by myself. So I just create a nice little space for myself. I listen to my music and I get quiet. But I think it is, like Erin said, it's good to bounce things off of people. The one suggestion I'd make to everybody, if you're going to write something, whether it's a television script or a feature script or anything, even if it's stand-up, go to somebody that has experience in that field and give it to them. I think a mistake that a lot of stand-up comics do, you know, just again, selfishly speaking in my world, is stand-ups will write a television script and give it to 4 other stand-up comedians that have never written on a show, that have never been on set or sold anything. And then the feedback is, oh my God, they love it. Yeah, of course they're going to love it. They're your friend. Give it to somebody that'll tell you the fucking truth. This sucks. It's awful. Good foundation, but you can work on pacing, tone, whatever. There's a million things, but I think anytime I stepped away a few years ago and just said, well, this guy sold something. Let me send it to him. And the notes I got were night and day in terms of, you know, again, what Erin was saying, relaying and giving it to people that are professional experience and have something on their resume that merits those notes.
Awesome. So this is my last question, and this can kind of go into the overall kind of final words that you guys want to say, but will you guys just talk about, and Erin, I'm going to start with you because I know your hustle is big, the kind of like the side hustle or the hustle of doing, you know, trying different things. Erin has a podcast, you know, she's acting, she's doing stand-up, she's writing. Will you just talk about opening yourself up and just trying different things to see what works for you and why that is good?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that one of the biggest lessons I've learned through stand-up comedy is that failure is not something to be afraid of. It's something that you're going to experience no matter what. Yeah, and so I'm always failing, and I'm okay with it. And whether you consider a rewrite like a failure, or whether you consider getting up on stage and a joke bombing a failure. Like, it could be anything that you consider a failure. Just stop considering it a failure. Look at it as you're improving, you're learning. This is an experience of growth rather than an experience of I suck and I'm never going to get there. So I think that has been something that's been really freeing for me, because it's kind of allowed me to take risks, to create different stuff, and to have, the opportunity to do a podcast. And if I don't want to do it anymore, to say, you know what, this is a great body of work. I did 2 seasons of it. Let's just stop and do the next idea or take a break. And kind of like how Steve was saying, a lot of people are putting pressure on themselves right now to create. We have all this free time. We never get this free time ever, blah, 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 which might be true. But also, I don't think that there's any point in like forcing yourself to create a whole bunch of stuff and to emerge from this with like a completely new body of work. Maybe
Right.
you have one great piece or one new podcast, or maybe you did a really great IG live series that you wanted to do and have guests on and learn from them and share that with your community. Like, whatever it is, I think that it's super important to just go for it. Allow yourself to fail, allow yourself to quit if something's not for you, and the things that are for you, allow yourself to get better, and don't get in your head about whether or not it's a failure, whether or not it's working out. Like, you're growing, you're always learning, and don't be afraid of that. It's like probably the best lesson I've ever learned in stand-up, which is a lesson in life.
You're doing some classes, right? Did you start tell us about that.
Yeah, you guys. So I actually started a course because I had some free time. So it's about finding your voice in comedy, right? So these are all the lessons compiled that I've learned from my mentors, from people that I've toured with, and things that I've learned along the way. And I just wanted to create something where comics or comedy writers could be able to have the opportunity to improve, get better, look at their writing. Because right now, with absence of stage time, I think it's really discouraging for a lot of people. And I think that like the bar of entry for learning about stand-up or learning about comedy writing should be lowered. I mean, classes in LA are like $300 to $500, and I think that's ridiculous. I think that education should be accessible for everyone, and experimentation should be accessible for everyone if it's something that you've thought about doing and you don't want to invest that much money in. So I just created this class based on all the lessons that I've learned, and if anyone wants to do it, I'm actually going to create a discount code for anyone here today. So yeah, I don't know where to put that information. I'll type it here if you guys want to do it. The code is ISA, and I'm going to give you guys 10% off just in case this is something you would like to do.
And where should they go to find out more?
I will put the link in here. It's how to find your voice in comedy. It's on Teachable. So yeah.
And before I get to Steve and I'll do his final thoughts, where can people find out more information about you? Do you have a website, Instagram, all that social media
stuff? So I have a website, but honestly, I never update it. So my Instagram is probably the best place. It's at Darling with 4 H's, or on Twitter, I'm Erin A. Darling. If you guys want to reach out or whatever, feel free. I'm always down to connect with people.
And check out her podcast too, Hot Pizza Ass.
Yeah, Hot Pizza Ass on iTunes and Spotify. I'm so bad at promoting stuff.
And I'm like, hello, plug. Okay, so Steve, what are your final thoughts sort of on the hustle or always evolving? I know that you're directing, you're writing, you're acting,
Yeah, I think Erin was really spot on in terms of failure. I think it's it's a big part of, look, it's stand-up comedy. I mean, stand-up comedy is rooted in failure. For every 10 jokes you take up, one's going to work. So nobody knows failure more than a stand-up comic. And I think nobody knows perseverance maybe sometimes more as an artist than stand-up comics do, because you're just constantly getting egg on your face. But I think just find that one thing, find that one project you're passionate about. I'm reading some of the chats here, and I see, some people feeling that maybe they're left out because they're queer or LGBTQ or a minority or whatever it is. The great thing for anybody these days is that entertainment is so fractured that you have an opportunity. There's some place out there for you to sell your show, or for you to have a meeting or whatever, or do it on YouTube. I mean, so many things are self-made and self-produced that are put up on YouTube. They garner some success, and then networks pick those up. So there is an outlet for you. The only person that has to give you fuel for your tank is you. And there's one thing, Mary Kirby keeps asking this question, so let me just answer her, because she goes, is somebody going to answer my question? And she was talking about how to structure your bits from intro to punchline. And just a quick answer to that, Mary, is that I think you want to set something up, and then you relay something ironic, something that nobody was going to think of. And that's the basis of any great joke, or the basis of any great film, is set up, punch. You know, you got your intro line, you got your medium line to solidify and accentuate and ground that. And then the punchline is something nobody thought was going to happen. And that's why magic is amazing. That's why stand-up is amazing. That's why The Usual Suspects is amazing, because you had no idea that was going to happen to you. So I think, you know, there's no difference between a great joke or The Usual Suspects or an incredible magic trick. And I think it's always just giving the audience something they never thought was going to happen based off of the information that you gave them. And the audience will believe anything you say. They'll believe anything you tell them, because you know, that's the one thing I learned from Jon Favreau, is that the world that you're creating, the audience is on board. If you make it believable, they're going to be on board. So whatever it is, the world, they're going to live in that world, and it's up to you to take that world and, you know, give them that twist at the end.
Awesome, thank you. I was going to throw that question in there, but I'm glad you just pulled it from the chat. Thanks. Where can people find out more information about you? Will you say the name of your movie that's going to hopefully be coming out in October again? And
if anybody wants to meet up with me, I hang out at clothing swap meets. I'm always looking for friends there. No, everything I have is Steve Byrne Live. It's BYRNE. And if you have a question that wasn't answered, you know, go to Instagram or Twitter and write me, DM me, and I'll answer it for you. But my film is called The Opening Act. It's going to come out, I believe, in October. And it's a fun film. And it's all these things that have happened to me on the road over the last 23 years encapsulated in 90 minutes. And it's kind of like a love letter stand-up, but it's about a kid's very first time on the road. And it's Jimmy O Yang plays the MC. Alex Moffat from SNL plays the feature act. Cedric the Entertainer plays the headliner. And you got Whitney Cummings, Eliza Schlesinger, Angela Johnson, Kathleen Madigan, Erin Darling, Bill Burr, Tom Segura, Ken Jeong, Roy Wood Jr., Neil Brennan, and just a ton of greats. I know I'm leaving some out, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And we're finally at the point where it's like, it's done, it's in the can. I can't wait for this to come out, and I'll move on and hopefully get to do this next one.
And it's an amazing script. I loved your script so much, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Erin. I appreciate it. And thanks for being a part of it too.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm excited. And I think, I mean, part of that too, and we are wrapping up, but I'm going to have everyone from ISA come back on and say bye. But it is, I mean, we've done these webinars, and a lot of the advice that all these, you know, people are giving is that it's about friendships and about relationships and who you know. So, you know, I know it's difficult right now because we're in quarantine, but expand your network and expand your interests and go to clothing swaps, because you'll meet Erin, and then you'll meet Steve, and like, you know what I mean? But I didn't want to go to that clothing swap. But I went and I got a hat and I met Erin. So, hey, you just got to expand your world and meet different people with different interests and be interesting also, you know, so. But thank you guys so much. Thank you, Steve. Amazing having you here. And Erin also.
Yes,
appreciate it so much. And Craig, do you have any final words you want to say? You just popped up. You just popped up.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. It's great information. And I wish I was funnier. That's all I can say.
Well, I feel that way a lot of times too. So don't feel so bad, Craig. But I appreciate what you guys do.
Drama writer, yeah.
I think it's a great community you're creating here. I'm reading all the chats and everything, and I wish everybody out there all the luck in the world. It's a tough world. It's a tough sell. It always is. But you know, at the end of the day, the only person that's going to do it, the only person that's going to make your dreams happen is you. Don't be relying on anybody else. It's going to happen. You got to have the perseverance, whether you just put it up on YouTube by yourself or it's out in 100 theaters on AMC, whatever it is. Just, you know, you got to believe in yourself.
That's true. Good
I think
words.
that is a perfect way to end this this event we've just had. Thank you guys so much for being here. We are back every week, every Friday, every Wednesday we do these. So make sure you check out the ISA events page and have a great weekend, whatever that